HMS Victory, probably the most famous English warship of all time. Everyone knows the story of how the Victory, under the command of Admiral Lord Nelson, routed the French at the Battle of Trafalgar, and how Nelson died a national hero. Quite rightly, this is a perfectly preserved piece of our maritime heritage. But what happened to the other ships under Nelson's command? Where are they? Well, the simple answer is they're all long gone. Either destroyed in battle, lost at sea, broken up, or just rotted away. Well, maybe not quite all. This is a story about the underwater excavation of one of Nelson's lost ships. It involves Nelson's mistress, Emma Hamilton, her husband, amateur archaeologist Sir William Hamilton, a priceless collection of antiquities, a shipwreck, and the discovery and raising of one of the most important pieces of maritime art ever found in British waters. These massive 32-pound cannon guarding the harbour here in the Isles of Scilly were once thought to be all that remained of HMS Colossus, a 74-gun fighting warship, the pride of Nelson's navy. I say were once thought because back in 1974, a Cornish salvage expert located part of the Colossus wreck over there. But what he uncovered was far more than a few soggy ship's timbers. Roland Morris had spent 25 years and a small fortune looking for the Colossus, sunk in a storm in December 1798. He finally found a jumble of wreckage and cannon lying in 15 metres of water off St Mary's, the bow section of the Great Colossus. The seabed was strewn with Colossus's cargo, thousands of ancient Greek pottery sherds and much else besides. So after 2 years of salvage, the artefacts, ranging from pistols to pulley wheels, gold watch cases and cannonballs, ended up in Roland Morris's Maritime Museum in Penzance. The Greek pottery, though, was taken to the British Museum, where conservators spent years carefully trying to piece it together. So with the cargo safely on dry land, that would appear to have been the end of the story of the wreck of the Colossus. Well, it was, for 27 years. Until last year, Time Team got a phone call from Martin Dean of the Archaeological Diving Unit, telling us about a local diver here who'd made an extraordinary discovery. So last September, we headed south for the Scillies. The ADU are the government-appointed marine archaeologists responsible for investigating shipwrecks around the coastline of Britain. And the Scillies, situated 30 miles off the southern tip of Cornwall, have got more than their fair share of sunken shipwrecks.
I was in the Orkneys at the time with my colleagues looking at shipwrecks in Scapa Flow, and I flew down from the Orkneys to the Isles of Scilly, and they took me to the site, and I dived on the site, and I was absolutely amazed by what I saw.
Swimming down a line secured by the diver who found the site, Martin immediately saw a row of cannon, their muzzles buried deep in the sand. A few metres away lay a partially buried statue, a much larger-than-life-size figure of what looked like a mythological warrior. The local diver had found the stern section of the Colossus, almost 500 metres from where Roland Morris discovered all of the Greek pottery in the bow. The Colossus, a 74-gun warship, the most efficient naval fighting machine in its day, was built in Gravesend in 1787. Almost 200 feet long, crewed by 600 battle-hardened British sailors, she first saw active service under Nelson's command against the French at the Battle of Cape St Vincent. Salvage vessel Scavenger, though somewhat smaller than Colossus, is where I caught up with Mac Mace, the local diver who discovered the stern section. What was it that you saw?
The first cannon, which at the time, I must admit, my boatman had given me just a swim line, a bob line, because I was just drifting on the tide. And he'd given me a buoy that was too big to pull under and a line too short to reach the bottom. So I got hold of the cascabel of a cannon, but I couldn't get a line onto it. So I did drift along the length of the site. Of course, you see a succession of guns, and you see timbers, which is what is very unusual for me.
Did you know what it was when you saw it?
Oh, pretty well. I mean, I knew that we'd got, obviously, a major piece of what had to be the Colossus.
The new wreck site was immediately designated as a historic shipwreck, which means no one's allowed to dive within a 300-metre radius without a licence from the government. MacMace was given a licence to survey the site working under archaeological supervision. It was already September when we arrived, and the dive season was due to end in a few days, but the survey was far from complete. The more the archaeologists saw of the carving, the more they realised they couldn't just survey it and leave it where it was. So what are we going to do over the next few days?
Well, what we're going to do is try and recover that carving. It's very delicate, it's unique, and we're going to excavate around it and try and recover it to the surface, put it in a tank and keep it safe. Because if it's left on the seabed for any length of time, it will deteriorate. Microorganisms will eat into the wood and take away all the surface detail.
So there's a sense of urgency.
Oh yes, it's a real rescue excavation.
OK then, let's do it.
Phil Harding and Katie Hurst were added to the ADU dive licence. They'd be working in teams and relays with Mac, his divers and the ADU to assist in the survey and excavation. Katie was first in.
This year we need to get a complete picture of what's visible on the seabed before we start making major inroads into the wreck by excavation. Obviously the statue is the part that is going to be excavated first because it's the part that's probably the most important and unique and the part which is the most vulnerable.
How different is doing this work for you than from doing land archaeology?
Totally different to me. All the things which are really easy on land, making a plan, taking a photograph, all become much more difficult underwater. As you know, you only get 2 dives in a day, possibly of an hour each, and that's it. So a whole day's work is 2 hours.
What can you see, Katie?
I've just got my first sight of the statue, and it is absolutely spectacular. It's about 4 meters long. I can't actually see the end of it because it's just going off into the distance. And I get to swim along, so I'm at the boot end, and now I'm up where his knee is.
What condition is the wood in?
It is very, very well preserved. The carving is just beautiful. It's actually very delicate. Now I'm going to swim up towards his face. Half of it has been sliced, so there's only the left-hand side of his face still surviving.
But Katie wasn't just down there for a sightseeing visit, she had work to do. Before the carving can be lifted, every timber has to be accurately surveyed. The archaeologists still don't know if the carving is connected to any of the other timber strewn across the seabed.
1 metre 88.
Roger, 1 metre 88. At a depth of almost 20 metres, their dive time's limited to about 40 minutes, so we're working in strict rotation.
2, 3, off you go.
It's Phil's first dive on the Colossus and his first glimpse of the carving.
It is just such a privilege to be down here looking at this.
I think he's suitably impressed. As the survey work continues, Phil's job is to carefully excavate around the carving to see how deep it goes into the sand. Below the arm, there appears to be the curved arch of a window frame. Phil, it's Tony. Are you excavating now?
I am.
What are you doing?
I am having the time of my life. It's like excavating a sandy site in the middle of a windstorm. Absolutely no need at all for a trowel.
Is it the carving that you're trying to clear?
I'm clearing away the wood from sort of underneath his its left armpit, where the window curves right the way round. It's just going down and down and down. It is enormous.
Can you show us where the window is?
As far as I know, it's this arc around here. And here, there must be some sort of rosette. And this is the final part of the arc.
Can you see how far down into the sand it goes?
No, I mean, we're just going on down. Obviously, at the start, it was right at the top here. I'm having a trouble with the fishes, don't worry. They're very well behaved normally. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Lovely job. It's a very dirty world down there, it really is.
How deep did you manage to excavate?
We were... I would have said I was fitting knocking the sand away like that, and the timbers were still going down there. Trouble is, you can't get rid of your spoil. It's awful.
Well, why did it just all have come back again? Now
No. On a dry land site, I mean, you can see a layer and you can excavate it and you can discuss it with your colleagues. But down there, I mean, it is just so different, and yet at the same time, it is just so good and just so rewarding.
What do you reckon's still down there?
I think we've got at least the stern quarter of the ship, and possibly even more. The way the ship's collapsed and lying on the seabed, I think it's still very early days to be certain which parts of the ship we've got. And we'll only sort that out by completely drawing and surveying the whole wreck.
Not really knowing my aft from my starboard, I went back to HMS Victory for a crash course in naval architecture. It doesn't have the elaborate carvings on it that were on the Colossus, does it?
No, the Victory was rebuilt in 1803, almost completely rebuilt in Chatham Dockyard. And by that time, they'd actually issued an order to cut down the amount of carvings in ships. They realised how much money they were spending on carving ships. So they decided, as they said at the time, to explode carved works. So Victory really has a very much reduced amount of carving there. Still a lot more than you expect in a modern warship, but very much reduced from what the Colossus was.
So where would our carving have been?
The carving would have been in that area around there, curving round like that.
And there would have been how many of these lined up along here?
Victory was a 100-gun ship, so obviously she carried considerably more guns than the Colossus, being a 74-gun ship. The main difference you'd see between the two ships, a little bit difference in length. Victory was about 15 feet longer than Colossus.
It would have been awesome to see something like this breaking up in a storm, wouldn't it?
I think it would be absolutely terrifying. When you think about the sides of that ship are a foot thick, good solid oak timber with planks on the outside framing, then planks on the inside and more structure inside that. Incredibly solid structure, but perhaps gives you some idea of the power of the sea when you think of something like that breaking up.
The reefs and rocks around the Isles of Scilly have long been a graveyard for all kinds of ships. But what on earth was one of Nelson's warships doing there in the first place? When I think of a shipwreck, I tend to think of something like we saw in the film of Titanic, where the boat goes down and it plummets to the bottom and stays there. But this seems to have been something entirely different. It's almost as though there's two shipwrecks. You've got half of it going down over there where that little black rock is, and the other hundreds of metres away. What was going on?
Well, what we're talking about here is a wooden ship, of course. That's the essential difference. And the two things about a wooden ship, really. First of all, it will break up much more quickly than an iron ship or a steel ship. And the second thing, of course, is unlike steel, wood is a buoyant material, and it's likely to either float or be pushed a certain distance out by currents and winds and so on.
But it does seem to have been in two distinct bits.
Yes, it seems to have broken up over a period of time, and perhaps one part being driven in one part direction, the other part being driven in the other direction, yes.
But how did the Colossus end up sinking in the Isles of Scilly? Her last voyage began in the Mediterranean during the Napoleonic Wars. A survivor of Nelson's famous victory at the Battle of the Nile in September 1798, Colossus limped back to the safe haven of Naples with the rest of the battle-scarred British fleet. Too badly damaged to take any further part in the war against the French, Colossus was given orders to take some 200 wounded sailors back to England. Her captain expressed grave doubts as to her seaworthiness, especially after other ships in the Navy had requisitioned the Colossus's best anchor and ropes. Leaving Naples in mid-November, the Colossus made good progress to Lisbon, where she restocked with fresh food and water. Ignoring advice to stay in Portugal to avoid the winter storms, Captain Murray and his crew set sail for England on November the 25th, 1798. Blown west by gales, they sought refuge in the Isles of Scilly, where on December the 9th, a local pilot guided them to a safe mooring in St Mary's Sound. But that night, the gale increased in strength. Then, near midnight, Colossus's main anchor rope parted. They were blown across the Sound, helpless in the teeth of the gale. In the early hours of the 10th of December, Colossus struck the rocks off the Southardwell Reef and lost her rudder. With no means of manoeuvring off the rocks, Captain Murray gave the order to abandon ship. Amazingly, only one man lost his life in the wreck of the Colossus, the ship's quartermaster, who was swept overboard while taking a depth sounding. The rest of the crew and all the wounded passengers were successfully transferred to the island of Samson. 200 years after the Colossus sank, can the archaeology on the seabed still give us new information about the wrecking process? Katie starts by examining the ship's timbers.
Hello, Katie, this is Phil. Whereabouts on the site are you now?
I'm just swimming across some timbers now. The whole floor bed is just littered with timbers and metal spikes. You can really get a feel of how the wreck was just spread out across the seabed. Look at this spike here, it's really harsh. But I think they were just blunt rivets, weren't they, to hold the planks together.
For God's sake, don't get yourself snagged on them.
I'll try not to.
Weathered by 2 centuries of erosion into a menacing forest of needle-sharp spikes, these are the remains of hundreds of yard-long, inch-thick copper-bronze pins that once held the timbers of the Colossus together. Hammered through the keel and transom, the ribs and the strakes, these were the metal bones of a wooden giant. As the site's cleaned of ever more sand and debris, the vast scale of the carving is becoming apparent. Unfortunately, the process of excavation is giving the archaeologists another problem. Lots and lots of small finds are being revealed. It seems to me there's actually 3 different elements to this wreck. There's the finds, some of which might be valuable, some of which are interesting, a lot of which are broken. There's the carving, and there's also the hulk of the ship down there.
Well, the hulk itself is the rear end of the ship, but just the port side. We feel at the moment that it's actually quite shallow. I suspect it's going to be less than 2 metres deep, buried in the sand.
So you mean that what we've been looking at over the last few days is just a tiny little sliver of ship?
We've just got like a large hull of a ship, and somebody's taken a bacon slicer to the rear half and just taken a 2 metre wide sliver off, and that's been laid on the seabed.
As the survey continues to investigate whether the carvings attached in any way to the other timbers, it's decided to raise the loose artefacts before they're lost or damaged forever.
Ah! It's a piece of timber with part of a leaf which comes round like that.
Okay, Diver 1. The plan is for Phil to retrieve the separate pieces of carving.
Okay.
into the blue fines tray.
Yeah, brother. Is that in the bag? It's like slow motion archaeology, this. It's always as though you're in space. Everything's weightless.
Take up slack on the down line. She's coming back towards the boat.
Okay. We've got the finds in the tray now. Do you want to show us what you've got? It's a little German helmet.
Well, apparently it's the butt of a pistol.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the handle goes in there, and you squeeze the trigger there.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
the flintlock mechanism works up there. God, yeah, I mean, it is like Christmas, isn't it, eh?
Have you any idea yet where that came from?
We know where it was positioned on the seabed.
Yeah.
It was about the same height as the arm and the head of the carving. So it's from a higher up piece.
But I mean, just a little bit like that gives you some impression of what the stern of the
Yeah.
ship must have been like. It must have been absolutely magnificent.
You feel how soft the wood is. It's just like sponge, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just waterlogged wood is just so delicate.
So what happens to it now?
Well, it had to be very slowly desalinated in fresh water, and then it'll have to be the water content will be replaced with a chemical called PEG, and that will keep hopefully the structure and the shape of the artefact.
A chemical called PEG?
Yeah. Polyethylene glycol.
Oh, right.
It's like a waxy substance that will replace water in the wood, so the wood doesn't become twisted as it dries.
To try to find out more about the stern decoration, we've tracked down the original plans of Colossus, given by the Admiralty to shipbuilder Mr. Cleveley of Gravesend in 1787. If this is the plan that the Admiralty had drawn to send to the building contractor, where's our wonderful carving?
What you see here really is a general outline of the shape of the stern here. You don't see any detail at all of the carving. The procedure would be that Mr. Cleveley of Gravesend, as well as being given a copy of this plan, he would also sign a contract which is 24 pages long and said in some detail what was supposed to be done with the ship. He's obliged to have a handsome taffrail and quarterpiece. This is a quarterpiece neatly carved, as shall be directed by the officer or overseer inspecting the said works.
So who decided what the actual quarterpiece should look like?
Probably Mr. Cleveley himself would decide. He would probably employ a local wood carver. And unlike French warships, which usually employed sculptors who were artists, he would probably employ a local craftsman.
Who was the carver?
Mostly these people are hidden from history. That's why they're craftsmen and not artists.
I've just heard so much about the site, and everybody's been going down and going, oh wow, when they come back up. And I've just been sitting here thinking, I want to go down.
I'll tell you what, when you get down there, you won't regret it. It is worth every minute of it.
Not being qualified to help out with the archaeology, I was allowed to make a short sightseeing visit to see the Colossus for myself. So you don't expect to see a work of art down at the bottom
Brilliant,
of the sea. And you're just swimming along, smiling at all these daft little fish, and suddenly you see this geezer's head.
That's right, I know, it's enormous, isn't it?
It's very sad in a way, isn't it? It's like, it feels like this person's been down there just in this posture for hundreds of years.
The thing of it is, you never get any idea of the scale of it, do you, until you actually get down there.
That's right. I immediately understand why everyone's so excited about it now. It's really so poetic down there. You know, I'm split down the middle. Half of me wants it to come up because it's just so interesting and you want everyone to share it. Yeah. But it's just so perfect down there. But to save it from being eroded away, the carving must be lifted in the next few days.
In the corner at 70, 80, 90. Is it 90, sir? 90, 100, at 90 in the corner, up 90.
Back in the 70s, when Roland Morris excavated the bow section of the Colossus, he brought up far more than Greek pottery.
Lot number 155, the Colossus items, rigging sheet.
Hundreds of artefacts found their way into his maritime museum. Since his death, the museum's been closed. Now the exhibits are being auctioned.
Sounding lead, bid 40, asking 50, 90, 100.
There's obviously a thriving collector's market for all things nautical.
At 2,800, selling at 2,800.
We took the opportunity of bidding for a few bits of Colossus that may give us a clue to the archaeology of the wrecking process. It is extraordinary to think that these screws were on a ship that was part of the fleet that was involved in the Battle of the Nile, and that 4 months later this ship sunk just here, and now we're looking at them again.
Yeah.
What would they have been made of?
These are made of a kind of copper alloy, which means that they were used below the waterline of the ship.
Mass-produced, presumably?
No, I think you can see from the style of them, each one is sort of almost individually crafted. They're something we take very much for granted nowadays, but they were a very new thing in those days.
So this was modern technology, it would have impressed people?
I think so, yeah.
Have we any idea who might have made these?
Well, we know that there was a contractor whose name I think was Forbes, who made most of the copper work for the Admiralty, and it might well have been one of his subcontractors who did it. A few years before this time, around about 1780, there was an order to use screws like this on the rudder pintles, which are essentially the hinges that operated the rudder of the ship. And I think it's quite possible this one might conceivably come from the rudder of the Colossus.
If these screws did come from the rudder, it confirms the accuracy of the historical reports of the wreck, which state that the rudder was broken off when the Colossus first hit the rocks. It must have sunk immediately, the wood eroding away to leave only the metal screws to be found beside the bow section, alongside thousands of sherds of Greek pottery. These sherds were all that remained of Sir William Hamilton's collection of antiquities. The packing crates filled with priceless pottery had been loaded onto the Colossus in Naples. In the weeks following the Battle of the Nile, the city had become unsafe, so Nelson, his future mistress Emma, and her elderly husband William headed for Sicily, his collection of antiquities to the bottom of the sea. 200 years later, all these little bits come off the ocean floor and land up in the British Museum. How on earth could you identify them?
Well, with great difficulty in some cases, because they were either washed into small pebbles like this by the action of the sea, or turned into solidified lumps of concretion like these. But among all of this junk, there were a number of sherds that were recognisable from the engravings of the vases that had been produced in Italy when Sir William was there in the 1790s. And these images served the conservators who worked so hard on the reconstruction of many of the vases that were on the Colossus as patterns.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You have a piece like this which could come from anywhere, and eventually you find that it goes perfectly there.
That's right, except with a jigsaw puzzle you expect all the pieces to be there, otherwise you ask for your money back.
This is one that's been put back together, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the most successful piece of reconstruction, and it's a bell crate, or a wine mixing bowl, and it was made in the middle of the 5th century BC.
Why is it so black?
Well, those are the parts which haven't been filled with a sherd, and they are made up with plaster, which is then coloured in. This is a clever combination of original sherds and modern makeup.
What was it about these vases that so interested Hamilton?
Well, he, to some extent, created the vogue for collecting Greek vases by collecting them, publishing them, and bringing them back to this country. But he, like a lot of people, couldn't afford big collections of sculpture that traditionally people collected on the Grand Tour. And so these were portable commodities, relatively cheap, that instantly made an impression in your household interior back home and said something about your tastes and your travelling.
Sometimes we look on people like William Hamilton as quite barbaric in their attitude towards archaeological finds because we see them as plunderers. But are we any better today?
I wish I could say we were. Certainly, William Hamilton's activities in acquiring archaeological material generated the need for more archaeological material and generated more collectors as he expanded his collection.
Isn't that what happens on dive sites today?
Precisely. It has happened in the past where material has been recovered and has been sold on the black market. The more material comes up, the more that goes on the market, the more it generates a market, therefore more material is required. And what we would like is to slow that down. We would like archaeological material to be treated in a disciplined and sensible way so that the material is recovered and the information is not lost forever.
Local diver and amateur archaeologist Todd Stevens has found lots of Colossus artefacts spread all over the seabed, which he's donated to St Mary's Museum.
What on earth is that?
That's a cannon flintlock. It's the trigger mechanism for one of the big guns.
From the 32-pounders?
Mm.
Didn't they just kind of just touch the touch hole with a lighted taper?
Yeah, in earlier days, but they changed. About this period, they were changing over to these, and they bolted them to the top of the gun and pulled the flintlock back.
Right.
And this over the flesh.
Primed the powder into that. And how do they fire them?
As far as I understand, there's a string or a cord comes out the back, and when it's pulled back and clicked into position, the gunner.
And then this really is quite a lethal piece of equipment. Canister shot.
Yeah.
And this also would have been fired from the 32-pounders.
Yes, there was, I think it's 9 balls around the central column, all held in together with like a cloth.
Yeah, oh, you've still got the wadding actually preserved in there. And I think, yeah, there you've actually got the imprint of the next ball, which presumably would have gone
right,
like that, and then you'd have another row of 3 on the top.
That's right, yeah.
So that when it goes straight out of the muzzle, you get 9 cannonballs and just spread.
With Colossus artefacts seemingly scattered in all sorts of unlikely places, the question of who owns what surely becomes important. When somebody identifies a wreck, how is it decided who owns it, who has got some interest in it?
Well, the receiver of wreck makes that decision. Everything on the seabed has an owner. But if a diver finds a wreck, they could well have salvage rights.
And what does that mean?
Well, if they are interested in salvaging material and bringing it to the surface, they could possess the site and become what is known as salvers in possession. So anybody who recovers something from the seabed has a simple procedure to go through, and that is declare their finds to the receiver of wreck's office.
And if you're a salver in possession, does that mean that you can sell the stuff that you find?
It's not up to the salver to sell the finds, it's the receiver who will dispose of the material. She will try and find the original owner. If it's historic material, archaeological material, the find will probably not have an owner in most cases, and the receiver will try and find a museum which would like the material. Now, the problem with this is that the museum would have to reward the finder with a salvage award.
How do they know how much to give them?
Well, they usually take the market value. But the difficulty is, of course, that often museums can't afford to buy the material.
So even though there's no bullion down here, nothing that looks obviously valuable, there still could be a lot of money to be made from this wreck.
The material that is down there that we can see is much of it is organic. The conservation costs will be high. The conservation costs may be as much as the market value at the end of it, so there may be a negative equity, in a sense, in the material. Although I have to say that the carving down there, probably on the art market, may be worth something, and the receiver would have to take that into consideration should it ever be raised.
With the last of the loose artefacts safely retrieved and the site survey almost finished, the archaeologists now know the true scale of the carving. And it's not good news. With the carving now over 3.5 metres long and getting longer, it's far too big, fragile and important to risk hurrying the excavation. But the season's almost over and the archaeologists have run out of time, and it looks as though reluctantly we're going to have to leave it on the seabed and hope that it survives the winter. Mark, how are we going to leave it down there and stop it being bashed about?
Well, there's a good plan in progress, and that is to cover the statue itself with a layer of something called terram. And it's sort of like a
a plasticky type material, but it prevents the sand washing over the top of the carving. But we'll put some sand down first, and then this terram stuff.
Why doesn't it just wash off?
Well, we're going to weight it down with sandbags, and hopefully that'll keep the storms at bay and stop the carving from being damaged.
Do you feel as frustrated as I do that we're not going to see it?
Absolutely, but you know, it's just running out of time, and we can't foresee lifting it. You know, we don't even know whether it's connected to other parts of the structure. We just haven't had time to go deep enough down, dig deep enough down, and see whether it's attached to anything else.
So we've got to be sensible.
Yeah, better safe than sorry.
It's infuriating that we've got to leave the carving for the whole winter. Let's hope it survives and that there are no more problems. It's June and we're back in the Scillys. The ADU have got a bigger boat and the carving has survived the winter storms. All we need now is some calm weather so we can raise it to the surface. Beginning of the new dive season, and not only is the weather awful, but we can't dive. In order to dive you have to have a special permit from the government, and it's the local salver who's got the permit, and he's decided that he's not going to let Time Team dive his site anymore, so we're completely stuffed. What are we going to do, Martin?
Well, we're not entirely stuffed. What we can do is use sonar technology to image the seabed. And what we've got on board is a sophisticated multi-beam sonar system, which will give us a three-dimensional image of the seabed between the original wreck site and the newly found wreck site. And hopefully we can discover a debris trail. That's archaeological material which has fallen out of the ship, or bits of the ship that have fallen off as it broke up. Because we don't really understand the wrecking processes involved in HMS Colossus.
So you think there might still be evidence on the sea bottom of some of the ship that's still left?
Oh yes, most definitely, most definitely.
With all this technology on board, we're trying to find a way to see the lift without breaking the terms of the licence. We begin our search for the debris trail alongside the Southard Well Reef, the spot where Colossus sank, and where Roland Morris discovered Hamilton's antiquities. The aim is to survey to a pre-arranged grid pattern. Holding an accurate course over the grid in a force 5 gale isn't easy, but the more traverses we can do, the more detailed the data, the more chance we have of finding the debris field and new archaeology.
It's the closest we can go on that line.
It's lucky that the sonar kit is designed to compensate for the variation in height between the boat and the sea bed in a 2-metre swell.
Volume's coming up quite rapidly.
This is special state-of-the-art sonar equipment that's been flown in for us from Norway. Tony, sonar's when you fire one acoustic ping down to the seabed and it comes back up again, isn't it?
That's right, yeah, you listen for that return. In this instance we have more than one. We have 127 of these pings, which enables us to just map it more rapidly. Every ping is a slice of the seabed.
So the boat goes up and down in a grid pattern.
Yeah.
And what is it that you see here?
This essentially is a bathymetry. This is the seabed. So the colour changes here indicate the varying heights on the seabed itself. So what we could be seeing here is some rocks.
So actually, you're not just going to pick up finds, you could pick up rock, sand, anything.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how the heck do we find out which bit's are boat and what's sand?
Luckily, in this instance, we have some prior knowledge of the site and we know roughly where certain artefacts should be. So if we're in the area, we can see an artefact, we can maybe define it as a cannon or a piece of timber. If not, we're kind of guessing that it could be a boulder, outcrop of rocks, it could be anything.
How long will it take before you can give us a clue as to where we ought to be diving?
We should know after a few lines. We should be able to pick something up which is very positive and say we have something here.
By using a magnetometer to survey to the same grid as the multi-beam sonar, we should, when we superimpose the results, be able to work out which of the many lumps and bumps are possible archaeology and which are just rocks. Initial results look promising, with lots of potential targets. But before we could dive on them, Martin and his team still had one important task to complete. They had to supervise the lift of the carving.
Is the diver ready for the water?
Right, the beacon is attached, diver's ready for the water.
Unable to send a cameraman down to film the lift, we could only look on. Luckily, the ADU helmet camera gave us an excellent view of the intricate manoeuvre. A metal-framed tank had been constructed over the winter and sunk onto the seabed. The carving was fully excavated and lifting straps attached. These were used to hoist the carving into a protective metal framework. The crane on board Scavenger, some 17 metres above, took the strain and began lifting the carving into position above the holding tank. The next critical stage was to very slowly raise the carving to a position below Scavenger where it would be firmly fastened. In the intervening winter months, MacMace applied for and was granted a government licence to raise the carving. As the licensee, he apparently has the power of veto over anyone who wishes to dive on what has seemingly become his site. He'd only grant his approval if we paid a sum of money. A very large sum of money. It does seem to me to be a strange state of affairs when an individual can be given a government licence and allowed to charge people money to dive into a public space like the sea to film an object that doesn't belong to them in the first place. The ADU, as government contractors, were powerless to help us. At least the carving's now been raised and is safely attached to the bottom of Scavenger. So what happens to it now?
Well, now the carving is attached to the bottom of Scavenger, the Scavenger's going to take the crates to Tresco, where it's going to be landed on a slip at high water.
And then what?
Well, the archaeological services from the Mary Rose Trust are then going to start a desalination process, which means they're going to replace the salt water with fresh water.
With the debris trail survey complete and a number of likely targets found, we need to make sure that they aren't inside the exclusion zone or on Roland Morris's original site.
It's Roland Morris's site here. This is Southard Well Rocks, which we reference this from. And up here we have the new site we've been looking at where the carving is.
And what's all this stuff over here?
This stuff relates to magnetometer hits.
So whatever's here, is that part of Roland Morris's site?
Well, I don't think it can be, because when we look at Roland Morris's old map here, we can see that the limit of it is about 160 metres. You can see that the magnetometer hits are well outside of that.
So what could this stuff be?
This is probably part of the debris trail, which is what we've been looking for.
So how are we going to prove that? Can we dive it?
Yeah, we can dive that. Just mean putting a diver in or putting Eric in and swimming around and see if we can see anything at all.
It's not inside the New Salvers area?
No, it's not. There's no problem with us diving in this area at all. The only problem might be that it might be kelpy on the seabed, so it might make it a bit difficult for people to see without, getting in amongst the kelp.
Well, at least we can get down.
At least you can get down.
In order to speed up the visual search, we've enlisted the services of Todd Stevens and his partner Carmen, who've spent the past 2 years diving in the area between the two sites. Eric, the ROV, has made it down first and has landed on what looks on the monitor like a piece of ship's timber. All Graham has to do is find Eric.
Okay, Diver 1, can you head towards the light? He's by the ROV. Okay, Diver 1, can you see the timber? A stone, is it? Roger. Okay, a misidentification. Okay, what I want you to do is head south for about 30 metres.
The next target for Graham to investigate is a small, discreet mag hit, which means it must be metal. Unfortunately, it turns out to be a small, modern anchor. Despite poor visibility in the kelp forest, Todd seems to have spotted some archaeology.
What is it?
Should be some sort of metal pen.
Roger that. It looks like one of the copper pins from the hull of the boat.
This pin's considerably smaller than the copper fastenings on the main site, which means it's probably from the decking or internal partitioning of the Colossus.
280 mil, Roger.
This is great news. The presence of just one copper pin and a nearby timber fragment over 200 metres from Southard Well Reef is definite proof that the Colossus broke up over a wide area. But what we need to find is something a bit more substantial.
Can you now head north, please?
Head north. Roger that.
With the weather getting worse, there's only enough time for Graham to investigate one more mag target. I think this is substantial enough. Another 32-pounder.
Do you see the cannon, Diver 2?
The 15th found on both wreck sites so far. With 4 in the gun battery, 2 on the quayside and a couple in Penzance, this means, if you assume a few were salvaged at the time of the wreck, that there are perhaps 50 Colossus cannons still unaccounted for. But where are they? The simple answer is that they must be down here somewhere. There's obviously still a lot of archaeology yet to be discovered. But we've finally completed what we set out to do, to find the debris trail of the wreck. And we've run out of dive time. So Graham returns to the surface, having plotted and measured this final Colossus artefact. At quayside on the nearby island of Tresco, the carving's ready to be lifted onto dry land. It's a tense moment as the delicate giant wooden figure breaks the surface for the first time after 200 years on the seabed. The receiver of wreck hasn't yet assessed the value of the carving, but when it's added to a conservation cost of almost £30,000, there may be few museums able to afford this unique piece of maritime art. The ultimate fate of the Colossus carving is still to be decided. When I first came here, I'd never even heard of the Colossus. But after diving the site and seeing the artefacts at first hand, I think we've all now got a vivid picture of how this once great warship came to be wrecked, preserved, and finally uncovered by the forces of the sea. It remains to be seen if the sands of the seabed will continue to drop and reveal more of the lost Colossus.
Next week, Tony and Co will be attempting to recreate Hadrian's Well. That's at the earlier time of 7 o'clock. Back to tonight, and most of us have seen a gladiator movie, but do we really know how the fighters lived and trained? Up next, a bone specialist uncovers the myths.